All right. First of all, thank you, RP and team, for inviting me for this topic. Again, this topic is also very close to my heart, speaking about content and especially talking a little bit more about the rational and the emotional part of it. So I'll straight go into this. In the next 19 minutes, hopefully I'll be able to kind of take you through some of the parts of what you're seeing now. It was interesting to put this first chart of agenda up. Why? Because I didn't want to give the spoiler away of whether I'm going with the rational part or the emotional part. So I had to kind of tread a little bit carefully to make sure that I don't give it away on the chart. But this is what we're going through. We'll talk about B2B, B2C, we'll also talk about a little bit from my experience and what I've been kind of reading on what is that B2B buyers really care about and getting them all into the buyer journey at some point in time. We'll talk about some examples and of course, we'll do a summary. This all when we talk about B2B versus B2C, these are all the things which come to your mind. I mean, short sales cycle, the other one is long sales cycle. Okay, B2B, okay, B2C, you are standing in a queue, you are going to go to the counter and then probably pay your bill and then get out of that shop. But you see a piece of Cadbury there, you pick that up. You see a toy, you have your son at home, and you pick that up. So it's probably more impulsive than what you think. Okay, that's not the process you are going to follow for buying a CRM software or a simulation software or a commercial truck. So that's going to be thought through, and that's what at least what we think. And this, so it goes there. It's emotional when you come to B2C, and it is rational when it comes to B2B. Now let's look at what is common amongst all these things. What is common amongst all these things? The buyer. The buyer is at the center of the process. In every interaction, whether it be sales or marketing, we are trying to influence that buyer to get to that decision. Now, what is difference from B2B versus B2C here? And what we are hearing now is that it is no more one single buyer, at least for the B2B. It is the B2B buying committee, which is that committee which makes sure that you take the right decision on the purchase, comprises 6.8 people on an average in the technology sector, and even the teams can become larger and larger. So when these group of people who are going to take a decision on whether to buy that particular software or a commercial vehicle or the manufactured product from you or a machinery from you, then you need to probably satisfy to a lot of these people, at least a good number of the people in the buying committee. So this is what LinkedIn says, and it's becoming more complex. But again, getting along with the themes of what's common here, it is a human behind the walls of the organization. So I'm going to read this out. Finally, you are not selling or marketing to the four walls of the organization. It is the humans who is buying your product and who is going to use it. So you are talking to a human who is a father, who is probably a husband, and a son or a brother. And so he also got emotions coming to office, rather than when he comes to the office, he's not that role which he dons, and then he leaves alone all his emotions at home. Now, is this all from my experience or what you have experienced, or does data got something to do with it? Let's go through that. So this is a study which I am referring here, which is done by CB Marketing, Google, et al. Some time back, in terms of understanding the emotional value behind a B2B purchase. So there is no role for emotions in B2B purchase and sales. It's probably the hypothesis they started with. So they asked the question, okay, do you see a real difference between suppliers and the value of the difference, do they value the difference that they pay for it? So for example, if there are two suppliers with almost all the cost same, but somebody is giving somebody is pricing it high, or somebody is having a business value a little bit higher, how much of that is going to impact your buying decision? 86% of the people said, no, that is not going to influence me buying that product. And only 14 said yes. So this clearly shows where it's heading to. So this is a myth. It's a myth to say that there is no role for emotions in B2B marketing. Okay, building further, same study. I'm referring the same study again and getting you some more information here. Now there is a business value versus personal value. On the left, you can see what is the business value which is coming. 74% of the B2B buyers see a business value. Only 31% of the prospective customers think B2B products provide a personal value, whereas 71% of the buyers who see personal value will purchase a product. So you can see the stark difference between how personal emotions and value is influencing a B2B buyer or a set of B2B buyers. This finally leads into the 2 times personal value has an impact when compared to the business value. So, so we talked about how we behave as a person. Also, we are seeing some data also coming into picture in terms of how emotions are leading you into buying. So we can deduce very easily or probably very convincingly with data and our own experience that emotions do play a big role in marketing to your B2 customers. Now, you may be also, if you're kind of following me through this journey, then you may be also understanding that, okay, yeah, this sounds logical, but where do I start? Is those emotion which I have seen in a B2B customer or which I have experienced when I buy a small toy or a chocolate, is it the same when I'm going to buy my purchase at my office? To help this, actually, there is another construct which I'm going to rely on, which has been done by a few researchers, and they had published this in HBR some time back, and there has been some updates towards it. So what they've done is in these elements of value, as they call it, they have understood some 40 different parameters that typically influences a B2B purchase. And believe me, these are all B2B purchases. So it starts from right at the bottom, what they call as table stakes. So table stakes are the minimum requirement that one product should have to make the cut, at least get to the table. Now they talk about performance. So you can see that these are probably the same things or the same parameters which we talk about when we are going to buy that product. Now we go a little bit higher. And you can see that this is modeled as per the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you remember, which starts from physiological needs at the bottom, which talks about food, shelter, etc. And then it goes up at the highest level in terms of self-actualization. So they've taken that model and tried to understand the B2B purchasing scenario based on these 40 elements. Okay, I'm not going to pick each and every aspect of this, but the second point is about ease of doing business. So here, relationship, responsiveness, expertise. Is a vendor I'm working with, is a partner I am working with responsive enough when I'm going to reach out to me for help? Is his expertise good enough to help me, not today, but also tomorrow? Of course, there are other things like time savings, decreased hassles of working with the vendor, etc. Going up, addressing emotional concerns. You see that slowly it is getting more personal than from pure functional to relationship to now getting individual values. Is it going to help my career growth and development? So if I'm an IT manager and I'm getting into this purchasing arrangement or an arrangement or a partnership with this particular B2B vendor, or if I am the procurement manager in a particular organization and I'm getting into that relationship with a particular vendor, then is that going to help me advance my career? Not that every time he will think about it, but there are subtleties of the messaging which helps him understand that, okay, I do this, I am seen as an innovator in the company, then probably I've got more value towards it. It's personal for me. Is it going to reduce my anxiety? Is it going to reduce my anxiety of, okay, will my systems fail at some point in time if I go with this particular person? And then that creates tensions in office as well as at home. Now, going further, at the highest level, it's about purpose, hope, and social responsibility. Are these products aligned with the values which I believe in, the future of my organization, as well as the future of my family, the people dear to me, as well as the future for the world? And I would strongly suggest you to go to the link and check this out. What this study also talks about that how these values interplay in majority of the industries. You take industries from retail to real estate, how these values kind of interplay and which values get priority over the other values in this hierarchy. But the main point here is that you start from a very basic hygiene factors, which are like hygiene factors. So it is a basic requirement you need there, and then you go up. As you can say that when you kind of close your eyes and then look at the content which you have in your buyer journey, most of the content which we have is always talking about the hygiene factors, and this builds the context for my further charts. So the question comes to your mind, where do I start? Okay, is the B2B emotion different from the B2C emotion? What are the different emotions which you use in B2C? nostalgia, it may be some happiness, sadness, all these. Do they work with real amplitude in B2B? Maybe yes, maybe not. There has been some conversation about humor, so I've got a different point of view on humor. Humor may work in B2B also. It may be some other emotions of belongingness, of trustworthiness, of assurance, of the assurance that, okay, this partner is always there with me to make sure that I succeed. But these are some of the values which probably, or the emotions which come in a B2B journey rather than in a B2C journey. So empathy in the real sense of the word. When I say real sense of the word, nowadays we have been talking a lot about the communications, the need for communications to become very empathetic, which should have been the matter with any of our communications. So can we understand the customer a little bit better, put ourselves in the shoes of the customer and talk to his emotions? Look beyond the demographics of the buyer. Look to the psychographics of the buyer. It is about the goals, needs and challenges, desires of that person, ambition of that person, which may drive your purchase rather than just hinging everything on your product features, your reduced cost when compared to the competitor, etc. So my challenge to you is to look beyond the demographics of that person into the psychographics of that particular persona. Having said all these things, would I ignore all the rational work? Would I junk all those materials which I created to appeal to the rational mind? No. The idea is to wrap, and I use the word wrap these conversations with an emotional tone. And I'll talk a little bit about when you go to the customer journey in terms of how do we kind of wrap that. Okay, system 2 versus system 1. So you would have been probably exposed to these terms through Kahneman's thinking fast and thinking slow. So system 2 is actually a place where you make very, very rational decisions. And system 1 is a place where we make intuitive decisions. Now, what typically happens, we think that we are making rational decisions. What typically happens is that your system 2 is justifying the decisions that your emotional mind is making. That's what is happening, and science has proved that. So you may think that you are making a very rational decision, but finally the emotions are driving that. And you can see from some of the conversations which I'm going to talk about how this is happening. Now you think what emotions your buyer will have if he achieved the business benefit which your brand is promising. Will that take away her anxieties, her fears at work? So think of the buyer, and I would challenge that, think of the buyer's buyer, and I'll try to explain that. In typically a B2B scenario, you are probably selling to an organization which is making a product, and that final product is consumed by the customer as an individual. And then can you bring the emotions of the individual who is using the product, which your partner, which your customer is making, with the usage of your tools, and bring those emotions in your conversations? I can tell one recent example which we did. So in MathWorks is a company which I represent, is a company which makes technical computing as well as simulation software. And we got 90 plus software products which appeal to different engineering sectors. Now, one of the recent works which I've done is to help an Indian electric bike company, I mean two-wheeler company, bring out their vehicle, simulate their vehicle, and then bring this vehicle out in a particularly faster time frame. And this is supposed to be an intelligent bike. So now, when we try to communicate to other people saying that, hey, this is something which we are good at, and this is some kind of testimonials which we have, we try to understand the customer of our customer, the electric bike company. We spoke to him to understand his emotions and probably share it further. So, and the content has come live, speaking about the emotions of that particular person. So, so that's something. Again, another example. This is Barclays Premier League. Premier League, for starters, it is the football league in UK, run out of UK, and it gets massive amount of audience. So this, I'm not going to play the video because of lack of bandwidth constraints and all those, but you can go through the video. The link is there. So this goes about a company called Low Cost Vans, and again, it's not a big company; it's a local company. And it speaks to the emotions of the MD. So the MD is a big football fan, and he wanted to be in the football team. Swansea is his local club, and there's a lot of affiliation to the local club there. Now he wanted to be a football player, but finally he says that in the video that I'm happy then I'm actually at the substitute bench. And then you can see the advertisement of that company in the substitute bench. And it talks to the emotions of belongingness, of pride that the MD can attach with being a part of the journey of Swansea, which is a club he's a fan of. And then finally, it wraps up with the message of a partnership in the Premier League actually kind of leapfrogs your business. Again, the subtle messages here, subtle messages here as about how Locos Vans as a company benefited from this partnership with Premier League. So this is one good example you should check out. All is good, but how do I get all this into the customer journey? That's something which I'm going to take you through right now. I'm going to put this very simple. I know there are convoluted ways of addressing the customer journey, and McKinsey has done that in terms of giving a loop customer journey. Now, we know that people come in at different points in time, people go out at different points, and that's all fine. But for simplicity's sake, let's keep this linear. One difference which I made from majority of the customer journeys which you see on the internet is about getting this as the last step towards this as an adoption. So you're going beyond decision to make sure that the person adopts your product. And that helps you probably create more voices of the customer. Because most of our products are now sold on a subscription model, and we need that consistent help from the customer to renew these transactions also. Now, what are the emotions which you can use in particularly in some of the stages? I will start with empathy. Hey, these are based off my experiences, probably not a comprehensive list of the emotions and not probably valid in all the cases, but it's from experience. And I'm sure that it gives a good construct in how to probably build your conversations. I understand your pain. You start from there. So you talk about that through industry reports, your thought leadership, because I understood the pain and because I have addressed that. And that's talk about the thought leadership. You are on the right track when the customer goes beyond that first stage to the next stage, when he's looking at multiple options. Then you talk about telling the customer that, hey, you are on the right track. You are trying to find the right solution, and you have probably addressed the right pain points in this journey. So you give a lot of case studies, evidences of how companies who have done that are probably benefiting there. Then you go into the decision phase where the customer is going to make that choice, make that decision. You show that commitment out there, and then then you make sure that your win is my win. So there is actually a gradation of emotions which happens when the client is going through this journey, and you are actually dialing up or dialing down some of your rational messaging here. So for example, I've put ROI studies. So when the customer is actually towards the end of the funnel, then you probably need to dial up on some of your rational messages. The idea is not to junk all those materials which you have made till now, but the idea is to probably wrap it around with some emotions and say it in the right way. And say it in all these manners. Actually, the channels and all won't change. And that's what I'm going to tell here. Again, start with the buyer, understand where the buyer is present, get the information to him as early as possible so that he or she can understand that, what's worked for her, understand the biography, remember the psychographics of that person rather than just the demographics. Find out where he hangs out. And I've got an interesting story here before I go into some of the examples. Sometime back in my earlier organization when I was working, there was a good discussion happening, and this was about targeting the oil and gas senior executive, one of the CXOs. And then after some time, so this was a discussion between the marketing, and after some time, the salesperson, the account manager walks in, and then after a little bit of time, he gets into the conversation and he said that, okay, look. So, I just want you to pause. So you are looking at the upstream oil and gas customers, right? Right. That's right. And then there are actually 8 of them. And I know all 8 of them. You may not need a particular marketing channel to deliver these things. And I can call them. I can pick up my phone and call them. I can email them. So that was one actually real glaring example of sometimes we over-engineering stuff to some extent. So first of all, understand what is required, what is the best method to deliver the content. Is the sales guy picking up the phone and delivering it? Use him. All right. Some more examples and I'll wind up with that. Left IBM, one of my earlier employers, not a very good example, but they made this 10 years back. You can see it on the left. So that's about Smarter Plan and how they are actually painting a vision of how you can create a smarter planet. So you talk trying to elevate some of the conversations to the self-actualization level. And they're talking about intelligence 12, 13 years back. Right one. Probably you can relate to it. Now all these advertisements are out. Tiger Woods has been out of Accenture branding for some time now. But this actually clearly tells you to pounce, grab the opportunity. So it's actually urging that executive to grab the opportunity and become the leader. And the below the text talks about grabbing the opportunity and becoming the leader. So it actually addresses some of the emotions which you have. I'm sure you would have seen this, the great split ad by Volvo, where Van Damme comes in. Again, this talks about the steady version of the steering control for those vehicles, but finally it is actually creating an emotion of wow. So it need not be always all these typical emotions we know. It's just that wow, so that when at the right time you are actually ready to get that brand recall in the mind. Remember the system 2 coming back and overriding, and probably system 1 coming back and overriding the system 2, or system 2 rationalizing the system 1 decision. This is when your brand images should come in, the memory should come in, and make sure that you do it properly. Now, the last one, this is again Zingerman. Zingerman is a local business, and this is about Google doing their AdWords for local business. So here they talk through one of the co-founders, as well as some of the people who use that service, the people who come and use the restaurant and the cafes which Zingerman owns. So it's about a cafe which has got multiple formats of the cafe. So here he talks about how he wants to build a national business with deep-rooted local foundation. And that's where Google Ads come in and make sure that he has got this delivery business, and he can kind of ship it to the whole world, but he's still local. He gets the best out of the local. So there are a lot of emotions playing here in terms of, again, belongingness, pride coming out of it. And the video clearly grabs some of those screenshots of AdWords coming in, how AdWords is making him go national with his local routing. So in summary, we are more emotional than we think. We think that we are very rational. And next time you post, there are a lot of emotions which come in and help you make those decisions. The buyer still remains at the center. So you will definitely need to understand her much better, addressed to his desires and psychology, rather than probably what we see as her role. It is not rational or emotional. It is all about making sure that you have the wraparounds of emotional around your rational. Dial down and dial up on some of the emotions based on where the person is in the funnel. And then probably you can reuse many of the content and get there. So branding and marketing is all about memories. So it's about creating those memories in the client when he's at the consideration stand ready to make that purchase. So if you can create those memories, the right memories with the right emotions, then that system 1, that emotional intuitive framework of the customer will help rationalize his logical thinking and get you the deal. And that's it from my side. Thanks for listening in, and hope if there is some time for question and answers later. Back to you, RP.
Thank you, Sanjay.
And thank you, RP. It's great to be part of this panel today, and looking forward to an engaging discussion on a topic that I guess we're all quite passionate about. So RP, yes, I represent Incture Marketing, and I'm happy to share some of the best practices that I have experienced, and what I can draw from my experience, as well as putting into practice in Incture and probably the other organizations that I've been part of. So the topic is interesting. It talks about messaging, whether it's emotional or rational, and what medium and formats that we can look at. And Sanjay probably alluded to the fact before, where he said that it's not about rational or emotional. It's emotional plus rational. So for me, it's about the messaging has to be about being sensitive and sensible. Especially in the context and the situational context and the world is in, I think it's a balance between emotion and rational. So as B2B marketers, we do have a responsibility and commitment to supporting customers and prospects through this current climate, which is quite unprecedented. And we can do that with impactful content. And in my view, that impactful content really stems from a format and a medium which is very close to my heart, and that's storytelling. um, Personal anecdotes and impact stories make a lot of difference. And I see that more now, prevalent and probably more impactful and impacting lives, because people are looking for that content given that they're not able to meet their customers and prospects face to face. So storytelling, podcasts, and series of short videos and case studies, with really how it's impacting the business, how it's impacting the lives of end users that our customers are currently serving, I think makes a lot of difference. So I think the format and medium that's creating more buzz or probably traction would be these. Um, Often I see marketers fall into this trap of talking about their solutions, and I see more in tech, and because I've been in tech for a long time, the value proposition in tech companies are primarily written by technical architects or product managers, and not so much by marketing and sales. So you will see a lot of collateral written by solution architects who talk about their offerings and features, and obviously they consider that to be putting forward because that's close to their heart. And often I feel that they ignore some of the context of putting themselves in the customer's shoes. And now more than ever, it's important to consider that. So I'll just quickly talk about what that is. So, from a content standpoint, it has to be responsible messaging, regardless of whatever times we may be in, and more so now. Is to lead with empathy. And I know Sanjay also spoke about empathy and emotion in the context of messaging, or a posture of support with a clear intent to help and not overtly sell. And that, according to me, differentiates our content, differentiates our messaging. If we were to lead in with an empathy, lead in with compassion, and lead in understanding what the customer's buying journey is, or where they are in their buying journey. So the spotlight should always be on the pain points or the challenge of the customer, and not so much about the solution. The solution, of course, has to cater to it, but it has to always lead in with that pain point. Also, I believe that there's a new trend that is emerging, and I guess we're all part of that as well. RP has put this wonderful weekly series of B2B marketers coming together. It's a cohort or a community that is coming together to talk about what are the best practices, what challenges as we as a community are facing, especially in this time. And when RP sent out the list of questions that came from the audience, I was, skimming through them, and I realized that a lot of the folks, you in the audience, are looking for answers on how do you tackle, a situation like this where you are not able to see your customer or prospect today. How do you reach out and make an impactful connection? How do you, enable sales digitally? How do you enable marketing to happen digitally? And that can only happen when you can build a community and a connection. And it's really not about closing deals, but it's about creating that community and making sure that the customer is inclusive in that community. And therefore, once you build that goodwill with constant messaging that resonates with the customer or the prospect, I think the goodwill will pay off in the long run. Because as you all are aware, many of the B2B customers or many of the B2B companies that we're currently targeting are probably stretched for budgets, and they really are not making some of those budget or financial decisions just yet. And therefore, when the market opens up, or where we believe that there is an opportunity for us, they will consider us once they feel that we are a confidant and a trusted advisors in their journey of understanding their pains and needs as we go through it ourselves. So that's really what I believe. Content at any stage of the funnel, whether you are at the top of the funnel or middle of the funnel or bottom of the funnel, I think these things should resonate. So responsible messaging, which is a balance of emotional and rational, sensitive and sensible messaging, always works. So what are the content conversations that one can start with? And this is to the audience who is stepping into the world of B2B marketing. I'm just sharing this. This is very close to home, and I practice this, I process this, and I preach this everywhere I do. It's to develop content and opportunities where you can think and share with your customer. where with a prospect. So be inclusive in your approach. Create content that can inspire, comfort, or spark a conversation. And that could be very early on in the cycle, or it could be just about an email that you are reaching out to your lead and talking about, hey, where you are in your journey. Maybe we could touch base at some point in time, and you need not sell or you need not advance that conversation. So it's all about and communicating the stories of resilience and adaptability, especially in the current context. I see a lot of content now because we are digital and the amplification has happened. So breaking through the clutter can only happen when you move away from the noise and look for the signals. So which means less is more. Imagery is very important. Sanjay showed a lot of imagery and how imagery is important. I think the focus is now about community and about individuals and how they are going through this journey. So adopt a more human-centered and realism in your imagery. And I speak very proudly for the organization that I represent today, which is Incture, where our focus has been always to look at imagery, because we are looking at brand ambassadors and people are our center focus. So and it's just so contextual, right? Because the person who is working with your customer is also going through the same challenge and perhaps would be a customer for somebody else. So when it's easier for us or easier for a customer, a prospect, to relate to the person on the other side selling or delivering your offering, because they would have also done that or been with in those same shoes as they were buying or in a buying role. So I wanted to sort of talk about these four I would say mantras, that impactful content can only be created if you break the clutter. You're able to be compassionate with your content and your emotional appeal, and it should sort of resonate. And the minute it does, with the tonality that you use in the content, you will start seeing that the medium and the format will not really matter. So I'll just very quickly talk about why content trumps over format and medium. And this is something which I've learned over the years, that, one needs to ask these 5 questions when one is putting out content or an impactful message. And I urge the audience to ask these questions themselves as B2B marketers or aspiring B2B marketers, that do you have all of these bases covered? For any impactful message to go out, whether it's a video series or a podcast or an infographic or a thought leadership blog or whatever the buying cycle may be, if all of these 5 elements or mantras are taken care of, I think you've reached your goal. You've also sort of created impactful communication, which will resonate and would probably help your sales organization or people who are looking to further that conversation in closing a deal, should be able to, it furthers their opportunity as well. So I'll just read these out. Do I have a specific defined audience for the communication? Is my message attuned to the audience current reality or situational context? Is the intent of my communication coming through clearly? So that's really talks about clarity. Is the communication focused on challenges of my customers instead of my offerings? So challenge trumps offerings. And is it what is in it for me? So with a clear subject line, title, and a lead paragraph. So so one would start reading the content, regardless of whatever the message may be, once these bases are covered. So that's really what I wanted to cover, RP. Hopefully, this was useful to the audience, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to any of what I have shared so far. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, RP, for inviting me, and it's good to see some friends in the audience. So that's always good. So you can hear me clearly, right? Let me know if there is any audience audio issues. So what I wanted to kind of do is kind of run you through an actual plan. Like RP mentioned, I worked with various companies, but one common theme is depending on the business model, the marketing model changes significantly. And that correlates to the title of the topic, whether it's rational or emotional. But I think I go back to a quote that has influenced me personally. and a lot of fellow marketer, which is marketing today is changing into entertainment. It's not about information anymore. It's changing into entertainment. And a lot of the SaaS companies out there are leading the change because the typical SaaS customer today is a small and medium business, and they are not buying traditionally, right? There is a stat out there that says the buyer is making 60-70% of the decision before he even engages with you. And today, companies like Atlassian or Freshworks, you don't even need to talk to a sales rep. You can just buy the product and upgrade the product on the web. So the business model is changing into a web-based model, a web-based marketing and sales model. That means marketing cannot just be about giving information. We need to entertain while giving the information. And we need to act as if we are speaking to the media and not just to customers, right? So we need to, in some way, I agree with Sanjay that we need to combine the rational and emotional elements, but we need to start with the emotional and eventually graduate up to the rational because the business model is changing with SMBs and SaaS driving a chunk of the business today. So what I wanted to do is, we can always kind of talk theory, but I wanted to actually show you a plan that we helped develop for a startup. Let's call this startup less than $1 million in revenue, and doing stuff around e-learning and digital transformation for companies. And so we worked with them. We did multiple workshops with them as part of a mentor workshop, and we helped develop content / GTM plan for them. So I want to kind of run you through that and show you how it is done. How can we combine both rational and emotional elements to come up with a plan that aligns well to the business strategy? Because it's all about the business model. It's all about the market. And more than anything, more than marketing, it's the market that determines the growth of the company. And it's the business model that marketing needs to get aligned to. I think that's what every board member and CEO is asking for today. So if you look at this company, we just put together, hey, what could be the why do they even exist? Because it's a board priority, digital transformation. You need digital transformation to survive and match up to the new age companies today. So they are selling solutions that enable this. Who do they sell to? They sell both to Fortune 500 companies and startups because their solution bridges the gap between different functions, especially on the e-learning side. So training teams in both small and large companies will buy them. And how do we create a plan for a company like this? So the obvious struggle in marketing always is you can do a number of things in marketing. Most companies scratch a few here and there, and depending on the skill of the people that are there, depending on the founders' understanding of marketing, and depending on what has worked very well for them, there are only a few things that they do. But I think one of the things, at least I watch by, is a serious decisions marketing model, and it kind of covers what the clear responsibilities and deliverables are between marketing, product, and sales. So we kind of start with that, going from discovery to launch to monitor and growth, right? What are the key things and what are the essential things you need to put together? So the first step in any marketing journey is to analyze where we are today. So every company is somewhere in the growth curve, but kind of analyzing what your strengths are, weaknesses are, and where the opportunities are. So today for startups specifically, they want to grow their organic traffic a lot. Paid traffic is important, but it will not scale, and it becomes very expensive because for most SaaS companies, the cost of acquiring a customer today is more than what the customer will pay over at least the first year. So that means you are on a net loss with new customer, and you are going to build profits with them only if they stick with you for 2 to 3 years. So with this background, how can you spot opportunities? How can you spot weaknesses? So for this startup, clearly a lot of the traffic was coming from direct search when people are searching for the brand name. And I think that's true for most startups. I think in terms of weaknesses, clearly there was not a lot of content out there, especially comparing themselves to competition, or how can they really create what's called as a job to get done kind of content. The what is and how to content on how somebody can train their people, what are the top 10 tips for training the team, what are the competitive comparison pages. So those were not there. In terms of opportunities, today everybody is ensuring that the customers are putting reviews in G2 Crowd. But outside G2 Crowd, there are tons of referral sites, IT Central Station, learning specific review sites, etc. So there were opportunities there to do both reviews and partnerships. And how do we align content to search and social patterns was another important thing. So there are a lot of topical things. Today, if you see LinkedIn, everybody is topical, right? Whether it's the George Floyd incident that everybody thankfully is speaking against, or the lockdown. So how can your content be topical and aligned to the search patterns? So that becomes important. So this is a view on how a startup could segment the market between the different geos, between the top 2,000 enterprises versus startups, what industries they come from. So this segmentation becomes very important, because you need to see which segments you are successful and what do they care about as you market to them. So every company typically has, between all the permutations, hundreds of segments, right? If you're talking to a CFO, or you're talking to a CFO of a startup versus a Fortune 500 company, and is the CFO worried about cash flow versus treasury or procure to pay? So the needs are really, really diverse. So you need to kind of get into the segments and have a very segmented play on this content marketing strategy. And the most important thing is, as I said, the market determines everything. The product or the category doesn't. So in a market which is growing at 30-40% CAGR, you can arguably grow your company maybe double of that. So with that in mind, you kind of set goals in terms of revenue. And in terms of the emotional versus rational, they wanted to own the category. So we said, we brainstormed a lot and said, hey, though you are doing e-learning, a lot of what you do is attached to digital transformation, because it enables e-learning across multiple devices. It enables e-learning within the product. So it's do and learn, and that is the core of digital transformation. So you need to attach to a larger category, and with that, you get access to larger markets. And when you talk to the media, I said that you need to behave as if your customers are media in some way. So when you're talking in the media, you are not talking about yourself, right? You are talking about the market and not just the product. And you need to make it entertaining, whether it's your personal values or your personal hobbies or your role models. And it's not about you, it's about the market, and it's about educating them rather than making you buy things. So that becomes important. And it's very important to have a recurring quarterly report, whether it's state of digital learning or state of digital transformation, that drives visitors and trust you. A lot of companies do this, and you do this in a way that you are not just talking about the product, you are owning the category by creating a recurring quarterly report. And IBM does this very well with their CEO, CIO kind of reports. Most services companies do this very well today. So we kind of get into the personas now. So their two key personas was, one is the Fortune 2000 kind of companies. And those guys are not going to necessarily come to you. They are going to search for you. They're going to research for you, but they expect you to go to them. So that is where marketing needs to enable a lot more outbound content. And outbound content is not necessarily email, right? You can offer assessments of e-learning or whatever product you have. So can you offer category assessments? And you put metrics on what this means in terms of content. Is it a white paper that is personalized to them that you are going to deliver to them? Is it a maturity assessment report comparing them with their competitors and their peers, saying that you are here and your peers are here? So you can create a lot of informational content on the outbound side, because these guys, the Fortune 500 doesn't make emotional decisions necessarily. They will base it on, even if they are taking emotional decisions, they will base it on rational arguments that they need to show to their boss. I think the famous saying is nobody gets fired for buying IBM, and a lot of companies have adopted that. But that is how the Fortune 500 still behaves. Even if they are making a rational, emotional decision, they will base it on a rational decision. So they depend on analyst reports, like the previous speaker spoke about. They will base it on the buyer's journey, and they may need different kinds of content depending on where they are in terms of buyer journey. You need to drive a lot of intelligence. So I think here is where you need to create account-specific scorecards, kind of laying out what solution they are using now, how can you knock them out, what is the marketing campaign for that particular account. And you need to enable agencies to do a lot more survey to find out where they are today. So you cannot make a call to them initially and ask them for an appointment. That doesn't necessarily work. You need to collect a lot more detail and help prepare your sales reps and SDRs before they go and make that pitch. So prepare before you are heard becomes very, very important. On the digital side, again, you can create a lot more content. But again, in the interest of time, let me move to the inbound buyer, right? The startup or the digital native buyer who's coming to you. So these guys, call it SMBs, call it startups, call it digital native. They are coming to you because they are a lot more proactive. They have an younger buying audience. So they are used to searching stuff on Google. They are not on Gartner today. They may look at what the solution for their pain is, and they may research on a G2 crowd or some review site, and they may decide who they want to go to. So they will come to you, and when they come to you, they don't want to talk to anybody. They will typically would not want to engage with the sales rep. They will want to click and buy and play with your product and see whether it works for them or not. So they are going to do a lot of research on the web, and you need to kind of enable that. And in some way, they want to change the world. So your content will be giving them practical tips about where they should set up the company, practical tips about how to use your product, practical tips about how you can reimagine the world from India, for example, showcase leading startups to them, showcase what other digital native buyers are doing with you, maybe gamify the whole experience with a gamified app or gamify your trial experience. So I think they need a lot of content they want to consume. So you want them to subscribe to your site and continue to educate them by making them build on you, by giving them a lot of free developer access, helping them with their career decisions, how engineers can graduate into a design kind of a role or a product management kind of a role, and have some of your leading customers who are not necessarily your users or buyers, but coach them on how to think like a product manager, show them how a razorfish thinks about the art of design, how the new startups are architecting a new digital India. So it's very holistic content, and this is content that they consume from other media outlets today, right? Whether it's BuzzFeed or the World Reader's Digest or whatever it is. So this is infotainment content. This is not just enterprise content that you need to develop. And events are also very, very different, right? Because during the events that you do, you are going to show them how to build something on your product. You don't necessarily have to showcase the classic enterprise model where you are showing them the Gartner Magic Quadrant, but you're going to say that, hey, here is how you can use the product, and at the end of the event, you are certifying them on the product. So that becomes very, very important. And then you also need to do for both the categories a lot of segment themed campaigns. This could be industry or vertical. And you need to see what percentage share of the digital spend different industries are doing and what teams they are worried about, right? Like SaaS companies, I talked about how the cost of acquiring customers today is greater than the cost of the customer and what the customer is spending with you in the first year. So can you talk to that pain point? So that becomes a lot more important. Sorry, there's a question here, I guess. So we'll take the questions at the end of this. If you're selling to a media company, You need to talk about subscription and monetization, because those two are the revenue models. You need to talk about state of video. What is the right ad model for you, whether it's cost per click or cost per action, what predictive ads mean. Telco, 5G becomes more important. Manufacturing, the whole industry 4.0 becomes a lot more important. So you need to talk the language of the customer when you build content, especially on the B2B side. BFSI, again, it's going through massive change because of COVID, but still very highly under-leveraged sectors, right? The average savings account of a customer in most of the emerging markets is very low. These are dormant accounts, and the economy is still cash dominant. So how do you enable digital models becomes a lot more important. Similarly for logistics, healthcare. And today, most of the startups are also ranking these industries by in shelter, who's impacted by COVID, etc. So today, industries like healthcare is buying, whereas industries like travel or manufacturing, they are not buying so much. So you want to prioritize which industries are buying from you, and you need to pump content which is specific to those industries. So that becomes important. This is how you could do an account snapshot. This is something we help them do for one of the banks in Middle East. And I think this includes a profile of the customer, what key metrics, how much they're spending on digital transformation, who are they spending that with, what kind of applications they have, and what kind of digital transformation or RPA or AI ML they are doing with those accounts. So this you need to do this for your top 100 accounts, because this becomes the funnel and content ideas for you as you shape up. So how do you do account-based marketing? This is, again, very, very content-driven. But for each of your key CXO within those top 100 accounts, you will have a 30-day touchpoint plan where you are starting with a display ad to them. You are doing a personalized email to them. You are not just selling to them and asking for an appointment like your sales guys are doing all the time. Because this is a common trap that most companies fall into, is you go to your customers and ask for a meeting all the time. But today you need to give them something in return, right? Either a coverage in a media publication or a joint article on LinkedIn. You need to give them an offer assessment. So you need to have multiple content ideas of how you are going to reach your top 100 buyers today. And you need to send them a very, very personalized email using your LinkedIn email campaign or your SDR. And you need to talk about them and not about you. So you need to congratulate them on an award rather than saying that I'm a S&P 500 company, or I was ranked as a top 100 startup in India by LinkedIn, etc. Nobody cares about you; they care about themselves. And you need to relate to their award or their work and showcase that similar award winners or similar people who've done work, whether it's large companies or digital native companies that work with us. And you mentioned in your press release or your analyst call that you are going to grow by this much, and we can help you grow this much. So that should be the pitch. So I'm kind of getting close to the 20-minute closing mark, but the key takeaways are fivefold, right? One is account scorecards for your top accounts becomes more important because they drive new content ideas, and they help you and your sales team prepare better when you go to the top 100 accounts. Having an account-based marketing strategy improves conversion. Today, if you look at your funnel, it's leaking, right? Typically, 1% of your lead funnel is what converts. Maybe 30% of your leads convert into an opportunity, and 30% of those opportunities convert to deal, and maybe 1 in 10 leads converts. That's the common stat in the SaaS industry. But you don't, if you have top 100 accounts, you cannot afford to just win one customer from the top 100 accounts. You need to win 20, you need to win 30, and your sales leader will say that you need to win all 100. So you need to have an account-based marketing plan to convert all the 100. And on the digital native side, you need to align to the buyer journey. We spoke about that. And as startups, we don't care about frameworks. We think frameworks are for large companies, but it's better to have a bad framework than no framework. So you need to list out the buyer journey, and you need to list out content by buyer journey, and you need to have key deliverables across your customers for the buyer journey. And if you want to be $100 million company, and if you are anything less than $10 million today, and you want to grow 5x, 10x in the next 3 years, you need to have both inbound and outbound channels fire to get you there. So those becomes very, very important. So I thought, let me show you a practical example of how the content journey could work on the rational versus emotional side. So with that, back to you, RP, for questions.